Dear students, today I'm going to discuss about Poetry 2, Semester 4. This is significant paper and you please look at this. In earlier videos also, we have given certain informations related to narrative poetry. Then I have talked about Sukumar Ray. There is exclusive video on Sukumar Ray which talk about nonsense poetry. And modern poetry still we need to cover, but now today I'm going to discuss slam poetry, that is a unit 4. So you see this, and in this slam poetry actually I haven't uploaded all those writers: Grace Nicholas, Benjamin Zephaniah, John Agard, Kate Tempest, Raphael Ziadeh and Mark Smith. Almost all of these poems are there in video form, where the small boy is there. Then we teach life, sir, my Shakespeare, then listen, Mr. Don, Oxford Don, and talking turkeys, and weeping women. So all these you will find. They are there in my video. Go and watch that. Even if you're listening, those simple videos will help you a lot. So right now I'm going to discuss about slam poetry and cultural politics of performing identity, Suzanne B.A. Somers Wallet. So this is text which I'm going to discuss today. Now, let me see the color, which color I can use. Okay. So slam poetry, cultural politics, performing identity, and B.A. Somers Willett. Now, this is, it's a very significant article, and you will find it very, very useful for your exam. So my concern would be reading and then giving you explanation. So let us start in this way. Now, anyway, today is Women's Day, so happy Women's Day. The practice of poetry slams, a competitive version of poetry reading, currently staged in bars, bookstore, coffee house, universities, and theaters across the country, can inform the field of literary studies and performance studies alike. Slams have proven popular among non-academic audience, and recently they have begun to win attention from scholarly audience. Poetry slams attract audience not only in urban centers like New York, Chicago and Los Angeles, but also in the areas distant as Sweden and UK or remote as Fargo, North Dakota. With the poetry slams surfacing in most US states, slams poets perform their work in feature films, in documentaries, on cable television, and even on Broadway stage. Slam is a phenomena it appears to have captured America's popular imagination. As competition open to the judges and anyone who wishes to participate, slams open the door not only for the socio-political issues of who has access to poetry, but also the political question of what poetry is and how it should be evaluated. So, the origin of the slam poetry is somewhere in urban center, and the places which are being mentioned that are Chicago, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and even many places in UK. So it is an urban phenomena, and it is socio-political issues. It raises the socio-political issues, and it is the competition is being held, and how this is what with the poetry slams surfacing in most US states, slam poets perform their work in feature films, documentaries, on cable television, and even in Broadway stages. Slam is phenomena that appear to have captured America's popular imagination. So now this is a current issue and people are talking about it. So then, because poetry slams have flourished nationally and internationally, As standardized rules of competition have emerged and non-profit organizations, Poetry Slam PSI, that is Poetry Slam INC, formerly headed by inventor of Poetry Slam, Mark Smith. So Mark Smith is a prominent person here. The moment we talk about issue Poetry Slam, has been established to administer them, the PSI, Poetry Slam INC. Okay, so this PSC, PSI, which you are able to see, is Poetry Slam INC. Certified slams, poets perform their own work in the time slot of 3 minutes and 10 seconds. So this is a time, 3 minutes and 10 seconds one has to perform. This is a significant time. 3 minutes and 10 seconds a poet has to perform, which is in turn judged by the willing members of the audience. Olympic style from 0 to 10, although some slams have improvisational round and some slam poets freestyle on stage. Most slam poets write time, rehearse and memorize their work before performing it. After a round of elimination, the poet with the highest score is declared the slam winner and is awarded prize and the title. Once a year, local poetry slams winners in the US and Canada form 4-person team and compete as the National Poetry Slam. So you remember this NPS, National Poetry Slam. Now in 16th year, now this has almost past 16 years, before 16 years it started. In addition to featuring team bouts and title, the annual competition also award the individual title. Both title carry cash award of $5,000 NPS press release. The growth of NPS has increased dramatically during its tenure, growing from 2-team competition with individual slammer in 1990, Poetry Slam 235, to 70 teams competition with 14 individual slammers in 2004. So it started with a 2-team and now it has gone up to 70 teams. Okay, and this is almost 14 individual slammers the competition held, and how many number of the cash prize of 5,000 rupees is also being given. The growth of slam phenomena has allowed the standards of writing tone, subject matter and performance style to emerge. So these are the basic, let's say ingredients: writing tone, subject matter and performance style. So these are being focused by the judges. What is the writing style? How do they perform? How is the tone? And then such work can be recognized generally as slam poetry that is created for performance and with the slam audience in mind. Almost all the slam poetry is written in first person, is narrative, and because it's delivered in a performative format, usually aimed to comprehensible upon first listen. So it is in a first person. Mostly it is written in the first person narrative. These are the factual informations which this article is giving, and I guess you have to remember this. So, and generally it is first written, then memorized, rehearsed. So these are the it is written, time, rehearse and memorized. They memorize their work. So it is written, then rehearsed and then performed. So first person, because it is delivered in the performative format, usually aim to be comprehensible upon the first listen. Devices such as homophonic wordplay, repetition, singing, call and responses the rhyme are frequently used on the slam stage. So what are the homophones are being used? Then wordplay, repetition, singing, call and response, and rhymes are frequently used in slam poetry. A wealth of different performative modes of address are embraced by the slam poets, but most of the work performed as slam falls under the categories of comedy, parody or drama. Comedy, parody and drama. So what are the categories? Comedy, parody and drama. In terms of tone, protestive and passionate pieces are frequent at slam, and many poets treat the slam stage as political soapbox. Some poets do almost exclusively. So these are the information which you need to remember, because these are the information which we need to remember, And what is this? It is in the first person narrative, right? And then it is the slam poetry is written, then time, rehearse, memorize. And what is this competition about? NPS. And what is, Mark Smith is the primary person. I think Mark Smith started it. And what are the issues? Socio-political issues are being, uh, discussed and talked or performed related to that. So it's earlier it was an urban phenomena. Then it is getting into every field of life, every place of geographically it is covering almost vast area. So what is that? Devices such as homophonic wordplay, repetition, singing, call and response, and rhymes are frequently used in the slam stages. So you remember these things, okay? Keep these things in your mind. Now, because most slam poems stage a first person narrative mode, which encourage a live audience to perceive the performance as a confessional moment. One of the most defining characteristics of slam poetry is a poet's performance of identity and identity politics. So, how this is performance and the confessional moment. Mostly, you will find that it is in a confessional moment. They talk about their personal things, personal life, confessional moments. Okay, although certainly, not all work performed the poetry slams are identity poems which directly proclaim the performer. The performance of such poem has become increasingly common in national poetry slam stage. Indeed, the prevalence of the identity poem performed at a recent national poetry slam caused one veteran of the scene note the progression of the slam from lyrical collaborative art to that of the art of self-proclaim. So how you can see its progress from the narrative. This is how from the lyrical collaborative art to the art of self-proclamation. That is said by Van Cleef. A great deal of the work appearing in recent slam and spoken word all anthologies and film confirm the trend of proclaiming one identity of an audience. Work that finds success on the national level almost always talks the subjective stances. At the same time, it is important to note that although the proclamation of the identity seems a key part of the successful slam, the craft and execution and the proclamation is just as important as the statement itself, which is to say how slam poets perform their identities is that important, and as they say about their identities. Performance, as one should expect in genre such as slam, is instrument that makes the poem bring true, false, and even audience. In this performance, art and or dramatic comedic monologue, because it engages the very same politics of identity that can govern and arise from those expressions. Still, slam poetry is unique in that it's represented time, judge, and competitive. Okay, dear. So now, thus, although the slam poetry certainly falls under the larger umbrella of performance poetry and performance art, it usually sets itself apart at displaying a keen awareness of its presentation in front of an audience and its public judgment by that audience. So actually, it's a performative art, and the special characteristics associated with this is audience are there and the public judgment by the audience. That is the features of this. Like a forensic meet, there are winners and losers of bout. Poets are eliminated or squeezed into next round of competition by margins of length of points, and trophies and prizes are awarded. Not the least, which is adulation from the crowd. Perhaps because of the competitive format, more seems to in stake poetry slams than open mic, reading, or performance exhibitions. Slam poets are usually motivated to score as they can, and slam audience express to be both engaged and entertained. So, this article, it's a self-explanatory, and there are features which are primarily focused. So, open mic, reading, or performance exhibition. Audience is there, judgment is there. In the Spile read before every bout at the National Poetry Slam, judges and audience members are advised to give poems score based on both text and performance. This is a rule. So, on the basis of text and the performance, the judges judge the performer. However, the subjective process of judge is often guided by more specific, competitive, vague as it may sound. Meera Damon writes, the criteria of slam success seems to be some kind of realness, authenticity that affects a fault change of consciousness on the part of the listener. This felt change of consciousness is indeed a powerful element in any kind of poetry, textual or performance. Ron Silliman. So there are two writers we have got here, and I guess you need to remember them. One is Meera Damon, and then Ron Silliman. Note that reader, listener, and sense of realization occur throughout all form of literature, but it is most amplified. And this is what the quote. Through the poem as confession of lived experience and mostly free verse presentation of sincerity and authenticity, that of the several decades, has been staple of most of the creative writing program in United States. Nowhere is this more evident than when this makes appear not in print but in person, a dozen of open mic and poetry slam events that occur around the United States every day of the week. In such circumstances, as a text is reduced to its most basic feature, perceptible surface characteristics, narrative or expository threads, and a sense of personality that is inseparable from the presentation of the reader, him or herself. Silliman outlines several crucial elements of the work performed at Poetry Slam. First is the use of live performance to maximum authenticity and sincerity of the first person voice, overwhelmingly used by slam poets. So first is the live performance is there. That was the first characteristics. The second is a poem sense of personality, which he claim is taken as a reflection of the poet performer. Marrying these two ideas, I suggest that the authenticity that slam audience reward is that least in contingent upon the performance of the identity that takes place on slam stage. If poetry slams are events where audience often take a poet's words at face value, and identity as a poet expression in performance is taken as a performer's identity in life, then many audience members are evaluating not only the writing and performance of the poem, but also the scripting and performance of identity. If authenticity, as Damon argues, the criteria for slam success, then convincing audience member of the authenticity of one's identity is a major component of a poet's success in slam. So it's a authenticity and identity. If you just see this whole idea, that is how a live performance is there. Definitely this is one of the sense of personality, and when the poets are performing, that is authenticity is the main. Authenticity and performance. So evaluation is also already a part, but authenticity is the main idea. So that is how we can say how this slam poetry argues. And in this we have got Damon, one writer. There are two writers we have already got it. So one is Maria Damon and Ron Silliman. So please remember these two writers, and this will help you to quote these writers in your exam. Okay. As yet, not all identities appear to be created equally authentic in eyes of slam audience. More often than not, marginalized gender, class, sexual and racial identities are celebrated at poetry slams. Poets performing marginalized racial identity can be specially rewarded. Proclamations of such identities undoubtedly attack slam audience, who may see poetry slam not only as a literary or performative but ultimately as a political event. Okay, students, now let's proceed. Because Most slam poems engage a first person narrative mode, which encourages a live audience to perceive the performance as confessional moment. One of the most defining characteristics of slam poetry is a poet's performance of identity and identity politics. Although certainly not all works performed at poetry slam are identity poems. Poems which are directly proclaimed of the performance, self and performance of such poem has become increasingly common on national poetry slam stage. Indeed, the prevalence of identity poem performed at a recent national poetry slam caused one veteran of the scene to note progression of the slam from lyrical collaborative art to that of the art of self proclamation. A great deal of work appearing in recent slam and spoken words anthologies and film confirm the trend of proclaiming one's identity for an audience. So here, if you see, there are these significant points are there again. That is how performance of such poems and prevalent of identity poems perform, and then national slam cause a veteran to progression from lyrical collaborative art to that of the art of self-proclamation. This is the very significant point, lyrical collaborative art to that of the art of self-proclamation. So, this is another characteristic of slam poetry. Works that find success on the national level almost always takes this subjective stance. At the same time, it is important to note that although the proclamation of the identity seems a key part of successful slam poem, the craft and execution of that proclamation is just as important as statement itself, which is to say that how slam poems perform their identities is just as important as what they say about their identities. Performance, as one should expect in a yana such as slam, is instrument that makes a poem ring true false within any given audience. In this aspect, slam poetry has such in common with its theatrical cuisines, performance art, and dramatic comedy monologue because it engages the very same politics of identity that can govern and rise from those expressions. Still, slam poetry is unique in that it is represented in time, judged, and competitive format. Thus, although slam poetry certainly falls under the large umbrella of performance poetry and performance art, it is usually set itself apart by displaying a keen awareness of its presentation in front an audience and public judgment by that audience like a forensic meets. There are winners, losers of bouts. Poets are eliminated or squeezed into the next round competition by margins of tenth of points, and trophies and prize are awarded not the least of not the least of which is adulation from the crowd. Perhaps because of the competitive format, more seems at stake in a poetry slam than in open mic reading and performance exhibition. Slam poets are usually motivated to score as best they can, and slam audience are expect to be both engaged and entertained. So it is like competition is one of the main significant point where the poets are more focused on sometime maybe winning prize in the space in the spiel. Read before every bout at the national slam poetry judge and audience members are advised to give poems scored based on both text and performance the rules. However, subjective process of judging is often guided by more specific imperative. Vague as it may sound, Maria Damon writes, the criteria of the slam success seems to be some kind of realness, authenticity, and effect felt change of consciousness at the part of listeners. This felt change of consciousness is indeed a powerful element in any kind of poetry, textual or performed. Ron Silliman notes that listener sense of realization occur throughout all the literature, but it is most amplified through the poem as confession of lived experience and mostly free verse presentation of sincerity and authenticity that of the several decades has been stabbed of most of creative writings program in United States. Nowhere is this more evident, and this makes appear not in print but in person. A dozen of open mic and poetry slam events that occur around the United States every day of the week. In such circumstances, text is reduced in a most basic features, perceptible surface characteristics, narrative and expository, and the sense of personality that is inseparable from the presentation of the reader, him or herself. Similian outlines several crucial elements of the work performed at poetry slams. First is the use of live performance to maximize authenticity and sincerity of the first person voice overwhelming used by slam poets. Second is the poem's sense of personality, which claimed is taken reflection of the poet's performance. Marrying these two ideas, I suggest that the authenticity that slam audience reward is at last in part contingent upon the performance of identity that takes place on slam stage. If poetry slams are events where audience often take a poet's words at face value, and identity expression in performance is taken as performer's identity in life, then any audience member are evaluating not only the writing and performance of the poem but also scripting and performance of identity. If authenticity is damaged, Damon argues criteria for slam success that convincing audience members of authenticity is one identity that is major component of poet's success in slam. So competition is one of the aspect actually, and yet not all identities appear to be create equally authentic in eyes of slam audience. More often than not, marginalized gender, class, sexual and racial identities are celebrated at poetry slam, and poets performing marginalized racial identity can be specially rewarded. Proclamations for such identities undoubtedly attach slam audience who may see poetry slam not only as literary or performative but ultimately as political event. With Demon's observations about authenticity in mind, it seems pertinent to ask why marginalized identities so often awarded the badge of authenticity at poetry slam. To fully address this question, one must consider both the specific performative expression of identity at poetry slam as well as larger cultural political identity that influence slam perception. Doing so can new reveal understanding about the desired enact between author and audience at poetry slam, and about how a so-called authentic identity is not only refined but created through slam performance. So in this point actually, mainly how this marginalization is celebrated in slam poetry. That is the main point we draw from this paragraph. You know how the marginalization is considered to be authenticity, and that is being celebrated. So, and this point of view is being given by Damon. So, this marginalization it's relating to authenticity, and then the performance expression, performative expression of identity. These are the main features we can understand in this paragraph. In this essay, I first discuss how the perceived authenticity of marginalized identity figure as criteria of slam success, and I explore political ramification and possibilities of this performance when it occur between African American slam poets and predominantly white middle class audience. Before tackling either issues, however, it is important to discuss the theoretical connections between authenticity and identity. So now next point is authenticity, identity and performance. When used to describe identity, the term authenticity is often meant to suggest instances in which subjectivity and identity are generated beyond or without cultural constraints. And that is, one authentic self is original, unique, true, existing before the outside of the discourse. For a performance of an identity, for a For a performance, for an identity poem to be deemed authentic is to assume there is an original and essential self which are performed emulates in performance. This appear to be criteria at work when slam judges score poems, and indeed might be the primary criteria slam poems have in mind when they write slam poems to impart such true truth about their subjectivity experiences which reveal an authentic self. Challenging this concept of authentic self, theorists have recently argued for understanding the self in social and cultural construction as the product of discourse. For all intent and purpose, identity in this framework is best through the fluid product of both conscious and conscious and unconscious performance. Performance studies scholars Irving Goffman and Judith Butler both refer to the presentation of self to the other, expression expression of identity as performative act. Goffman, in a 1959 monograph, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, clearly addressed this issue of the performance of self in his concluding comment. A correctly staged and performed scene lead the audience to impute a self to a performed character, but this imputation itself is a product of sense that comes off and is not in cause in the self. And a performed character is not an organic thing that has a specific location. It is a dramatic effect arising diffusely from the scene that is presented. And characteristic issues, the crucial concern is whether it will be credited or discredited. It is important to note here the Goffman. So in this here the whole paragraph you have to again see certain things. Please mention Goffman and his this article, Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. Then we are having a discussion about Judith Butler and Irving Goffman. And one more thing, it is how this authentic self is original, unique, true, existing. Okay, so this originality and authenticity you need to understand, and how this is pure purpose of identity in the framework is a fluid product, fluid identity. I mean identity as if it is transforming into one part to another part. So it is important to note here that Goffman using theatre as a metaphor for social interaction. It is talking about the performance scene of everyday life, not just those of the stage proper, and these performances are sites of identity production. Furthermore, the last phrase of this quotation is crucial to understanding the role as audience plays in constructing identity. Selfhood is constituted by how the performance of the identity is received and judged by others. As I will discuss in a moment, the act of crediting and discrediting identities is precisely what occur at many poets' slams. Audience judge poet, among other things, on the credibility of their performed identity. Butler works confirmed Goffman's view, suggesting that subjectivity is itself constituted through compulsory performance of social norms, which she calls performative act. The term performative was coined by linguist J.L. Austin to describe what that actually do what they say. Speech acts such as "wow, I do" utter at the marriage ceremonies of late. However, the term performative has taken varied definitions which have earned critical purpose in many disciplines. Generally, most performance studies scholars agree that the term performance indicate a real-time theatrical act which defies and challenge identity, and that term performativity indicate the discursive process of how that identity come to be. Judith Butler, because Judith Butler is using this performativity in a very extensive way. Scholarship on performative use frameworks of phenomenology and Lacanian psychoanalysis has enabled a powerful appreciation of the ways that identities are constructed it iteratively through complex citational process. Parker and Sedgwick. However, the performative aspect of identity, the discursive citation of normative behavior, is not always readily apparent to those involved in the transaction that generate such identity. Performativity seeks the authoritatively conceal the very norm it repeats, making the iteration and identity both noble and law. In Butler's own word, performativity is not a singular act, or it is always a reiteration of a set of norms, and to extent that is acquire an act a status in the present. It conceal or dissimulate the convention in which it is repetition. Moreover, act is not primarily theatrical. Indeed, apparent theatricality is product to the context that it is historicity remain dissimulated, and conversely, the theatricality gain a certain inevitably given the possibility and full discourse of its historicity. Okay, this is part 3.